guys. So thought I'd do a quick little tip video here because I noticed on forums and things like that oftentimes people just struggle a little bit with using black dye on leather. So I thought I'd throw out a few tips. And first tip right away is use good quality dye. And this is the Fibings Professional. So that's the one I would suggest you use. Some guys use different concoctions of their own for using black dye, and you're welcome to try that, of course, but I've had pretty good success with the Fibings. It's worked well for me, and I haven't had any issues with it, so that's what I'm sticking with. But feel free to try what you want, but at least use the professional dye if you're not making your own kind of concoction. So I was making this black knife sheath here, and I thought that it just kind of triggered in my head, go ahead and, put out some tips. So first tip is buff it really well. I already buffed this piece, but you want to use some kind of cotton or something like that to really give it a good buff, and that gets dye is basically, it's got pigment in it that's particles, and it's carried in the liquid part of the dye. So once the dye dries, oftentimes on the surface you can have some of those particles left over, and that's what rubs off and makes a mess of things if you don't buff it really well. So make sure you get in there. I'm just using an old sock, and you just buff it really good until you look at your material and you're not getting any black on it anymore. So that's tip number one, is to make sure you buff really well. Tip number two is to make sure that you use plenty of dye. Go ahead and make sure you soak it really well. And that goes for most dyes, honestly. There's some niche situations where you want to get different shades and things like that, where you're going to apply different amounts of dye, but for general use, you're making a knife sheath that's going to be used, items that are going to be used heavily, outdoor situations especially, don't be too stingy with the dye. And so I have these two pieces here to illustrate why. And let's see, let me find a gouger to show you. Hang on just a minute. So this is a piece here that I dyed pretty heavily, and this is a piece here that I just kind of did a light application. So I'm going to gouge both of these. Do each of them twice. And as you can see, let me flip this around here for you. So this one here is still black in the gouge, where this piece here clearly has the dye or the leather color underneath. And why that matters is when you're using sheaths outside, it's going to get scratched up and banged up a little bit, and so you don't want that leather color coming through, right? So you don't want, the first time you go through some brambles or something, have that color show through. And also, when you're making whatever you're making, make sure you dye the inside really well, because this side is more porous and this side will absorb the dye better. So it'll kind of get dye, the outside, the flesh side, you can see the dye doesn't soak in very well. And if I put more on here, it would definitely soak in further. But when you apply some on the back, you get this where it goes all the way through. So make sure you dye both sides. So that's basically it, is use plenty of dye and use a good quality dye, and then buff really well. And then when you put your finish, and last thing is often, use a little neat's foot oil. That kind of thing is a pretty common thing to use. I only apply the neat's foot oil on the inside. I've found that if I apply it on the outside, it sometimes softens up the dye a little bit, and that can also cause some of the dye lifting off. I don't know how scientific it is, but that's what I'm going with. That's what seems to happen sometimes. So I apply it on the inside, and that's also good because that's the porous surface, so that neat oil is going to soak through all the way through. Can sometimes take a few days, but it does soak all the way through. Works really well. And then, you know, just put your outside finish, and I use some kind of, I have other videos talking about the finishes I use, but I find any of the beeswax based ones work really well and hold the color just fine. You can also use some of the more modern type finishes, you know, like tan coat or something like that. That seem to seal pretty well. It's kind of more like a paint kind of thing. So anyway, so that should cover it. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave in the comments below. But I found those simple steps really make all the difference for me. So hope that helps. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.